Okay, we're gonna see how this goes. I'm recovering from food poisoning right now, so hopefully I don't have to run to the bathroom in the middle of the stream, but if I do, it's probably because of the terrible poison that I'm still working out of my body. Um, Somehow managed to get pretty severe food poisoning yesterday while I was out with Lindsay Ellis, and I have been just expelling fluids out of every hole in my body for 24 consecutive hours. So I'm just, trying to stay hydrated, trying not to die. But nonetheless, I think I can answer some questions. So we, yeah, we'll go ahead and get started on this. How's everyone doing in the chat? I'm going to drink some Powerade. It was not Cheesecake Factory that hurt me. If we'd gotten into the Cheesecake Factory, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Okay, question time. So. Ree Carter wants to know, has it always been classical and blues, or did you go through any other music phases? Is there a punk Natalie? So there was definitely other music phases. There has not ever been a punk Natalie. I don't know why, but something about my whole personality and aesthetic is just not very punk. I'm kind of a maximalist, and I don't know. I just do it. Does this look like? Do I look like a person who does punk to you? Just yeah, exactly, Allie. There hasn't been a punk Natalie yet. True. What other music stages have there been? Well, there's been jazz. I did a whole stage where I was playing jazz piano. I still play jazz piano. Maybe I'll bring that back more. I don't know. I guess I listen to a lot of different kinds of music now. I listen to bluegrass, although I'm not really the type of person. See, I was actually having this weird thought as I was driving home today that I was imagining dating someone and having an argument about bluegrass with the person I was dating, because I like bluegrass, but I wouldn't want to date the kind of person who likes bluegrass. So whoever I end up dating will be someone I get into a fight about bluegrass about. But yeah, I listen to a lot of EDM. But yeah, I guess there's never really been a punk Natalie, although I'm not against punk or punk music, but it's just not really my thing. Miss Contrary wants to know, are there any specific clothing styles that you enjoy wearing or find aesthetically pleasing? Well, I guess the stereotype about trans women is that they want to dress like teenage girls a lot of the time, but I feel like I am really just settling into grandma fashion with this shawl and this lace, and I'm pretty okay just being this 75-year-old woman as fast as possible. I guess the clothing style wise, I don't know. How would I describe my clothing style? It's kind of mildly bohemian, but in a bougie bohemian way, not in a hippie bohemian way, right? I wouldn't wear, I would never wear hemp. And my armpits are very thoroughly shaven, but I do big jewelry and things like that. I don't know. I don't know. What other... Am I characterizing this accurately? I also feel really out of it right now. My head is just broken from... I haven't eaten... So I ate ramen during the Discord hangout. I ate one bowl of ramen, and that's the only solid food I've been able to keep down in 48 hours at this point. So I'm really fucked up. Luke Jensen wants to know... This is going to be a weird stream. Luke Jensen wants to know... first of all, we love you, so don't feel too bad about the shit happened on Twitter. Oh, thank you. As for my question, I'm wondering if there were any people in your life, especially other YouTube people, that you were able to rely on to help you through that what happened. I feel like a lot of people stayed out of it because it also risked them losing followers. They didn't necessarily have to agree with you, but was anyone just a source of kindness and support for you? Sorry for the long question. I supported your decision from day one. Thank you, Luke. Yeah, I had a few people who were very supportive. Peter Coffin, who's here in the audience tonight, has been very supportive of me behind the scenes. Lindsay Ellis, I hung out with her all weekend. She's always been very supportive of me. Yeah, it's true that a lot of people have not said anything publicly about it. I don't really want to go into that here, but I definitely have some people who have been very supportive, yes. So, fortunately, I do have that. Alejandro Herrera asks, going off your cameo in Peter Coffin's latest video, oh, lots of Peter Coffin today. Going off your cameo in Peter Coffin's latest video, do you think that dichotomy that pits individualism versus collectivism is valid, or is it false? I think it's false because I believe that autonomy of the individual is a presupposition of the freedom of everyone. I'm biased because anarchist. Yeah, so I basically think it's false too, in a sense, or at least I think the idea that that leftism is distinctively collectivist or more collectivist than rightism, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. Because I think that I would agree with you that individual happiness or individual flourishing is one of the goals of politics. And I think it's kind of a mischaracterization of communism anyway, that it's about the subservience of all individual happiness to group aims. Because even if you read Marx, I think it's clear that Marx thinks that communism is the best thing for individual flourishing, right? There's this whole thing about in his version of communism, there's going to be you can fish in the morning and be a philosopher at night, or whatever the quote is that I'm mangling. But it's obvious that he doesn't think, he's not envisioning this kind of gray world where individual desires are subservient to the Borg or whatever, right? Clearly the point of, he thinks that the point of freeing the working class from this alienated labor situation is that alienated labor is this massive obstacle to the individual human happiness of workers. And it's weird to me that people think, why is capitalism, what's so individualistic about capitalism? Capitalist ideology claims to be individualistic, but in practice, most people work for corporations and things. A corporation is a very collective entity, so I don't really see why a corporation is more of an individualistic situation than, say, working for the government. That doesn't make sense to me. Emmanuel Smith asks, your examination of your relationship with your audience on Twitter really struck a chord. Watching your work is, for me, an example of self-care, and as a fan, I want to be a member of a community that is a healthy source of support, not a burden on your mental health. So my question is, what does your ideal fan base look like? Do we just leave you the hell alone, or should we try to do better at voicing concerns without sharpening pitchforks and projecting our shit on YouTube personalities we've never met? And Daynara responds to that, saying, I second this. How do you want us to support you right now? So I certainly, my ideal audience is definitely an engaged audience. I don't want people to just, I at least in the past, have always enjoyed having, especially even at the very beginning of my current YouTube trajectory, I was always proud of the fact that my videos had a very high ratio of comments to views, and I like getting feedback from people. But yes, I agree that I wish they would not sharpen pitchforks. I wish that they would not. I wish they would disagree in a way that was sort of generous enough to view me as trying to do what I think is the right thing, and not just assuming some kind of sinister evil in terms of what my motivations or things are. Um, but yeah, what is my ideal audience is? I mean, I've often felt like I have an audience that's been pretty ideal until recently. Um, I like engaging with the audience, and I like doing these, Discord hangouts and things. I don't always have a ton of time for it anymore, but um, I personally much, you know, it's easier for me to make videos and things even when I know when I have people in mind who I'm doing it for. Um, but yeah, how do I need to be supported right now? Well, basically just I just need some just people to tell me to try to understand what I'm doing so that I don't feel so much to sort of counterbalance the effects of these people who've just decided that I'm evil. Um, and the people who are my patrons have been pretty good about that, I must say. Sam says this ended up way too long, so feel free to skip to the bottom. Okay. The bottom. My question is, would you ever want to do a video on the nature of wealth and power and how society and politics are manipulated by the rich and powerful to keep us fighting each other instead of creating a better world for all of us? Yeah, so people have asked me for a long time, why don't I talk more about economics? Or why don't I talk more about wealth inequality or capitalism? And I've been saying for a long time that I want to do that, or I want to start doing more of that, although I'm sort of afraid to at this point, in part because I feel like there's a lot of, I'm already having enough trouble as it is with certain people in my audience, and people, when it comes to this economic stuff, people on the left are extremely sectarian, and so I'm just afraid to say anything too specific about it, because if I come out as, say, a social democrat or a democratic socialist or a socialist or a communist, there's going to be all these other people who are fucking mad that I'm the wrong one. And I don't know which one I am, and I don't even want to know, because the minute I pin it down too specifically, I'm now involved in this horrible infighting that I don't want to be involved in. So my solution is just to be an SJW and just pretend capitalism isn't happening. I mean, that's not exactly true. And I do, like I said, I do want to talk about it more. I just have to think about how I can do this in a productive way that's not going to cause that's not just going to be this massive divisive pain in the ass. If that makes sense. But yes, I agree. It's something I should talk about more. Gwen Hennessy asks, what is intersectionality? How does it relate to differ from identity politics? So intersectionality is really just the idea that, well, actually, let's do identity politics first. So identity politics is, in my experience, usually a derogatory term that describes political activism or political work on the basis of, race, gender identity, things like that. Derogatory because the presumption is usually that what you're doing, if you're doing identity politics, is simply advocating on behalf of your own group, without any kind of regard for any bigger political picture. So I think that what we call identity politics, or what gets maligned as identity politics, is ideally not just advocacy on behalf of your own group, because in that sense, or if that's all identity politics is, then Richard Spencer's identity politics is white identity politics, and we do I do see people calling it that pretty often. But I think that what's distinctive about, say, Black Lives Matter or about transgender activism or whatever, is that it's not just people advocating for their own self-interest. It's specifically advocacy for justice, which means they're trying to remedy a situation of injustice and not just advocating for their own self-interest, irrespective of whether it's fair or not, because I think with Richard Spencer, he's not advocating for justice. He's advocating for what he sees as the self-interest of his racial group, to the detriment of everyone else. So intersectionality is just the idea that if you're involved in identity politics or social justice, that you sort of can't do this effectively, or you're sort of a bad, it's bad politics, in short, to exclude the interests of other groups. In other words, it's bad to do feminism without consideration of race, or without consideration of, queer identity and things like that. And that, you sort of go amiss if you are doing feminism, for example, that only really considers the interests and problems of white women, or that only considers the interests and problems of upper class women, or so intersectionality is just simply the idea that you need to have a full-bodied politics that really that perceives the world accurately, and also it pursues justice correctly. You have to be able to willing to consider the ways that these different sort of groups are affected together. The idea that black women have problems that may be sort of distinctive from problems that black men have, and also from white women. That's the basic idea. Lyric Hartwell asks, do you have any advice on how someone could or should balance reading for pleasure and reading critically? As someone who reads quite a bit of fiction, I often find myself wanting to read more philosophical, political texts, but don't want to cut out reading fiction entirely. Well, you can... It's funny because I was more of a philosophy reader earlier in my life. I would, at least when I was an undergraduate, I was usually reading fairly difficult, abstract philosophical work. And then after I graduated, I guess, I started reading fiction more and started reading for pleasure more. I mean, you can read philosophy for pleasure, I guess, but I think it's important to do both. Because if you only read abstract academic kind of stuff, you sort of lose the humane or the human element of writing, of human communication, right? Because what's great about great literary writers is that they are wonderful communicators that show some part of their human experience to you, and it's pleasurable. You feel less alone when you're engaged with a voice that it communicates to you effectively. So definitely keep reading fiction, keep reading great writers, but make some... What you can do maybe is divide your reading time into two halves. If you have a chance to read earlier in the day, read academic shit with some caffeine in you. This is my drug-based methods. And then later in the day, like before bed, then you can read fiction and enjoy it. And thank you for the side note too, Lyric. Butseps asks, is casual sex bad for your soul? You said that you are a spiritualist. Are there any other ists that you feel comfortable identifying as? Well, yeah, what did I even fucking mean when I said I was a spiritualist? I guess I was being like a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but jeez, it's actually hard. I haven't seen that video in a long time. Why did I say that again? Let me think. I guess I was saying that I was accusing Chesterton of being crypto-Darwinian or something. I guess what I meant by it was really more that I have it was really more of an aesthete kind of thing than a spiritualist kind of thing. Or that I thought that I think that subjective experience is valuable for its own sake and not because of its good to society or because of its role in reproduction or anything like that. So do I consider myself any other ists? I really try to avoid the ists, as I was just saying, because of the sectarianism issue and the divisiveness issue, and that if you commit yourself too specifically to something, it just leads to a lot of fights that I don't think are useful. And I also am very pragmatic in terms of what my politics are at this point. So I just want to make the world better by whatever means will do that. And getting too committed, I think, to a very specific ideological vision of how to do that, I think becomes an obstacle. And it leads to these, it leads to people saying like Jill Stein voters are the reason we have Trump, or, Hillary Clinton is the reason that, like, I wish we could all move away from this because it's so, I just see it so damaging. Oh God. I'm so afraid of half my audience disowning me when I support whoever runs against Donald Trump in 2020. Because it's going to be an imperfect, shitty person. But they're going to be better than Trump. Rapacious Flux says, you've mentioned a foray into neuroscience before. If you had to study some hard science you hadn't studied before, what would it be and why? Yeah, so I was a neuroscience student for a while. If I were to study a hard science I haven't studied, definitely something in biology. So maybe genetics, or probably genetics, actually. I don't know I know a little bit about genetics. I've taken some classes on it a long time ago, but I think it's kind of interesting how incredibly sophisticated our scientists' knowledge of human biology is, and how just like no one really know, like how not well appreciated this is by so many people. Because like I was looking into this a little bit when I was doing research on like for my like what is gender video. I was reading about the like sort of what determines whether a baby becomes male or female, or whether a developing fetus becomes male or female. And the reason that having a Y chromosome generally produces male children is that there's a gene, I think it's called the SRY gene, which when turned on, is on the Y chromosome. When turned on, it initiates this like, because everyone starts out, like all fetuses start out as female, I guess, anatomically. And then what happens is like your vagina kind of closes up, and that seam is actually the kind of like seam that runs along the bottom of the like penis and scrotum. And just like reading about this process by which this genetic pathway creates male anatomy, it's just like crazy complicated, and we basically totally understand it. And no one knows that, but it's like, I don't know, it's just super fascinating to me. And it's interesting to me too, as a trans woman. Biology is interesting. No, but it's interesting too because hormones are like this crazy nanotechnology that does all kinds of shit to all parts of your body. And yeah, biology, man, is fucking crazy. I feel like I'm just like so out of it right now. Hopefully it's cute instead of annoying. It's probably annoying. When you have to ask that question, it's not. Vashta Narada asks, I don't have a question. Oh, okay. But beyond the money I give you for the superb videos you make, I'd like to explicitly express support for you. Oh, thank you. I will read this on my own since there's no question here. But thank you, Vashta, I appreciate it. Tomas asks, the other day I was reminded of one of Tocqueville's ideas of American democracy, that it shifted rights from groups to individuals. Noted my view of American democracy as an outsider. So firstly, what do you think of this assessment? And secondly, would our tendency to elect individuals as representatives of groups an undesired side effect of our current idea of the democratic state? Oh boy. I'm not sure I've ever read Tocqueville, actually. It was a big thing when I was an undergraduate. All the fucking political science people always reading Tocqueville. I know basically what he says, I guess. So this gets right back to the question of individualism. Um, I actually don't know this idea about shifting rights from groups to individuals, but I do think that a lot of that idea of whether rights pertain to groups or to individuals is kind of at the heart of some of these like social justice disagreements that we have, because if you have a view of rights that's based solely on individuals, and if that can lead you to not look at systems differences or group differences in terms of how people are being treated, which is how you end up with people saying things like they'll invoke individual responsibility, right, as a way to try to get like impoverished people or oppressed racial minorities or whatever to sort of take responsibility for their situation, and it can lead to a view of politics that's blind to group differences. So, I mean, is Tocqueville right that American democracy shifts rights from groups to individuals? I don't know, and because in my current out of it state of mind, what I guess I'm missing here is a sense of what the English anyway notion of rights was before the American democratic system. Like, did the English have a system of rights that involved rights for groups as opposed to rights of individuals? Because I'm not sure that's true, at least because in English political philosophy, John Locke and so on, the individualistic thing is very much there. Tocqueville is French, so... And the French political philosophy does have a more collectivistic view. Rousseau has a much more collectivistic view of rights and of politics in general. So it could almost be... that I almost want to say is like a francophone, anglophone thing. Sorry, what was the second part of this question? Would our tendency to elect individuals as representative groups an undesired side effect of our current... Hold on, I have trouble parsing this. Would our tendency to elect individuals as representatives of groups an undesired side effect of our current idea of the democratic state? Would it be an undesired... I'm sorry, I'm having trouble parsing that second half of the question. My brain's just too dead for this. I feel like I said a lot of things to the first half of that question, so I'm just going to move on. Tyler Boone says, if I weren't a broke grad student, I'd be commissioning an artist to make a wall-sized tapestry depicting Lord Foppington cuddling with Jim Sterling's Duke Emile de Ardcourt on a 4-poster bed with maroon hangings. I guess that's not much of a question, so I'll ask. I would do that too, Tyler, if I had the funds. Are we ever going to see those two characters in a video together? Working on it. I've proposed this to Jim a few times, and he's into it. It just hasn't yet quite happened. I don't know. For a while, he was talking about coming to Baltimore, so I would love it if Jim Sterling came and stayed with me a couple days, and we could film a video together. So I'm working on it. Is what I'll say to that. Alicia McGee says, is there anything we as your patrons can do to support you emotionally right now? Well, just the fact that you even care enough to ask is helpful to me. So thank you. Basically, I need like compassionate advice. Like, if people think that I'm fucking up by doing these debates or things, like, I'm fine with them letting me know. I just needed to come from a place of thinking like I said earlier, thinking I'm trying to do what's right instead of criticizing me for being a sinister plotter scheming to destroy trans people or whatever people think I'm doing. Somniferous Almond asks, the name is great. First of all, I hope you're feeling better after a pretty intense, totally unnecessary shit heap. Yeah. I'm getting there. The food poisoning is not helpful, but otherwise doing somewhat better. Um, Please don't think that the massive amount of effort you put into creating thoughtful, entertaining, engaging content or the contributions you make to social justice discourse elsewhere ever go unappreciated. Oh, thank you. In my opinion, you're the best things to happen to YouTube since Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Oh, that is high praise indeed, Almond. Speaking of educational videos that take a dark turn, your violence video got me thinking an SJW horror flick could be really intriguing watch. How far do you think a leftist horror movie could go before it becomes too problematic? Also, what do you think? Okay, hold on. I'll answer that question first. So first of all, it's funny you say that because I have been thinking for a long time I would really like to direct a horror movie about being trans, because there's tons of horror movies about trans people where trans people are scary monsters, like Silence of the Lambs, like Sleepaway Camp, etc., etc. But basically a gender dysphoria kind of horror movie. And I think I work little elements of that into my videos. I mean, I think the gender dysphoria video had like the scene with the hair and the flies. That was kind of like working toward the sort of transgender horror kind of thing. I think that, yeah, someone said in the comments said Get Out, but Get Out is kind of a social justice horror movie, right? And it's fucking great. So I think it's clearly possible to do this. I'd like to see more of it. And yeah, I've thought about doing it myself, although I don't really have not really in the position to be directing movies right now, but I would love to do it if I ever had the chance. Second question here. Also, who do you think would win a debate, Chris Ray Gun or Lil Slugger from Paranoia Agent? Oh, I think Lil Slugger for sure, and we all know why. Garrett Mitchell asks, "Hey Contra, I hope you are doing well. I really appreciate the efforts you put into videos, especially ones on topics I wouldn't normally think about. I'm currently drawing a blank for a good political philosophical question, so I just want to know your opinion on my favorite band, Nine Inch Nails. If you like them, do you have a favorite album? If you don't like them, you're wrong, and also why not?" So I don't really know Nine Inch Nails that well, but I know I like some of Trent Reznor's soundtracks I really enjoyed, although I can't think of one off the top of my head that he did specifically. I just know that I've heard his soundtracks on movies a lot and thought like, oh, I like that. I actually saw, what is his wife's name? I saw her live once a few years ago, and that was a good concert. But I'm not like, it's not the kind of, I don't listen to that much contemporary rock. I don't know why. I just sort of never got into it, but I do like them. Yeah, they're good. Beachside Emu. Oh man, I'm having trouble reading. That's how fucked up I am. Beachside Emu. Hi Natalie, if you could wake up tomorrow with a new talent, skill, quality, what would you pick? Well, the first thing that I thought of when I read that question was playing the harp. I don't know why. And that's probably not even what I would pick. A new skill, talent. I guess I would be able to sing really well. That's probably what I would choose. If I could have like if I was actually really good at singing, I would probably go with that. Either that or maybe speaking some other languages, Spanish or Japanese. Brad Savvy says, during your time in academic philosophy, how familiar did you become with Eastern philosophy or any other philosophical influences outside of Western European? Are you familiar with, or at least aware of, any distinct or unique philosophers or schools of thought from Africa or the Middle East that are religious? I ask because I feel like most discussions on philosophy are primarily Eurocentric. Yes, so you're correct. You're correct in that philosophy is extremely Eurocentric, and as a result of that, I don't know that much about Eastern philosophy because philosophy departments and American universities, or Western universities in general, generally don't even teach Eastern philosophy at all. So I have never had an academic, I've never studied your Eastern philosophy academically, and what little I know about it, I've learned through my own research. Middle Eastern philosophers, those tend to get studied a little more, like Avicenna, whose Arabic name I can't remember, of course, but he's mostly studied as like a kind of preserver of the Greeks, right? I mean, like, the whole story that we tell of the history of philosophy is just incredibly Eurocentric, right? Like the only reason that the Middle Eastern philosophers are even mentioned is like, oh, they did the valuable work of preserving the Greeks until it could be picked up by white people again. So yeah, I really don't know that much about like Chinese philosophy or no, I have no idea. And good luck getting most academic philosophers interested in that, because a lot of them just don't care. They just have taken it as given that only the Greeks and medievals and then moderns are worth studying without any reference to Eastern philosophy. I mean, the exception, I guess, is that some continental philosophers, starting in the 19th century, did read Eastern philosophy. So Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, German philosophers, both knew at least a bit about Buddhism. Now, most of what they thought about Buddhism was incorrect because they were dealing with bad translations and shit, but they were at least sort of interested in what they thought was Buddhism, especially Schopenhauer. So that is the sort of point where Eastern philosophy kind of makes it into Western philosophy through a kind of distorted lens. But I personally, no, I don't know that much about Eastern philosophy, unfortunately. Time for more Powerade. Bryce. Oh, speak of the devil. He asks, what are your criticisms of Nietzsche? Is there a contra-philosopher to him, figure of philosophy embodying the opposite, with a view you are in agreement with? Love your videos. They just give me insight and perspective and to challenge my certainties, and I'll love you for how you're so truly challenging norms and the simple act of self-becoming. Oh, thank you, Bryce. Well, Nietzsche. So, okay, what are my criticisms of Nietzsche? Geez, it is. That's a big question for me to think about right now. Nietzsche. So, when I tend to rag on Nietzsche in videos, it's almost not that I'm like criticizing him directly so much as like in the degeneracy video. It's the kind of people who like Nietzsche really that I'm attacking more than Nietzsche himself, but just the kind of person who's attracted to the idea of slave morality, that morality is basically a slavish thing invented by the weak and that the strong don't really need it. You know, maybe that's a misinterpretation of Nietzsche, but it's it's an idea that tends to attract sort of douchey people. I mean, I think that Nietzsche is actually a really interesting philosopher in a lot of ways, and I don't know how great of a classicist he is by modern standards, but the things that he says about the genealogy of morality, I think is an interesting thought. And it's kind of become a critical part of like Western intellectual thought for a good reason. That just the interest with genealogy of an idea like morality is so. I mean, this kind of historical approach to philosophy that we do today is sort of owed a little bit to Nietzsche, right? The idea that if you want to understand what a concept is, like morality, what you should do is look at the history of the concept. Like, that's not how philosophy was generally done before him. And it is, I mean, it's something that we do all the time now. Like, it's something that I do in my like fucking YouTube videos, right? We want to know what race is. Okay, well, let's look at where the idea of race came from. And then you discover that actually it's a thing kind of invented by early modern Europeans around the time of slavery, you know? That's like a very Nietzschean approach to the topic. So I guess I do like that part of it. Sometimes I find his rambling, his raving and ranting against Christianity vaguely amusing. I'm not a big fan of all this stuff about Superman. But Yeah, Alicia, I suggest reading the Genealogy of Morality. Um, what else is worth reading of Nietzsche's? Birth of the Tragedy, maybe slightly less so. Um, I'm kind of past the point in my life where I'm really going to get into Nietzsche much anymore, but I'm glad I went through it when I was younger. Is there an anti-Nietzsche philosopher that I prefer? That's a good question. I guess not exactly, although I will say that I think so. My philosopher of choice, I guess, to the extent that I have one, is Wittgenstein, as I've said before, especially late Wittgenstein in the book The Philosophical Investigations. I know I said this exact thing before, but the first like 25 paragraphs of Philosophical Investigations, I think, are the most clear thinking passage in all of Western philosophy that kind of just, in my opinion, just closes off a huge, like, entire fields of philosophy. It shows them to be unnecessary. And I think that my thinking about gender is really influenced by Wittgenstein, actually, and just the most broadest sense of, like, how do you approach a word or a concept, and how do you look into what a word means? You know, let's see. Gary Marshall asks, "Who's your favorite member of the Wu-Tang Clan?" Oh gosh, I don't know. I guess Flava Flav. But these questions, I'm having to make a lot of demonstrate a lot of musical knowledge that I don't necessarily have here. Catalina Levy asks, "Hello, Natalie. I'm going to cheat and ask three unrelated questions." Okay, pick one you like. Um, One, what do you think? What's your experience with Latino macho culture sexism? Please don't say you can't have a say on it due to culture differences, etc. Well, that is my first impulse, is to say that, because there's something somewhat like uncouth about white women complaining about Latino masculinity. But my understanding is that it is very much a problem. That toxic masculinity kind of shows up in all kinds of cultures. But at least that there's that, it's very overt, I feel like, in maybe Latino cultures, whereas in English, because in some ways, like, the English, as in like British English, have like the idea of masculinity that is the opposite of that, and that, like, English men are kind of not effeminate exactly, but like there's a lot of ways that, like, English men are not, like, for instance, Southern European men or Latin American men. Like, an English man is just not that offended by shit you say about his mother, right? And whereas that's not the case of Italian men. But I guess, where am I going with this? But English men can be just as shitty and just as toxic masculinity. They have just as much toxic masculinity. It's just that it comes out in a different kind of way. Um, I don't have that much personal experience with Latino macho culture. I'm aware of it. But I also do feel that it's not really my... this isn't really my subject to take up. I know that's exactly what you said I shouldn't say. Two, what is your relationship with manual visual art, such as painting or sculpting, digital, traditional? Your sense of color harmony is exquisite. Oh, thank you. So I really don't really have any painting experience at all. I like painting. I like looking at work other people do, and I most of the ideas about color and stuff that I get it from movies. Like, I like taking a kind of painterly approach to maybe looking at, maybe painterly is the wrong word, but like, I just like the visual ecstasy of movies or movie makers who care about just making the frame into a work of visual art. And with my videos, because my videos get painted or drawn so often now, that when I'm like composing shots, I often think about someone's going to draw this. And I think it causes like a higher level of attention to the visual appeal of the composition, maybe, and the lighting and things like that, thinking about people painting individual frames of it. And all right, I'll do your last question too, sure. What's one of the most important things that you learned while studying music? Probably simply the habits that are required to develop a skill. So I think that learning to play the piano as a child and as a teenager, the skills that you use to learn to play an instrument are good for almost every other thing. Like when it comes to voice training, so I'm training my voice to be, male to female voice training, and that, I mean, it's just the exact same skills that you use when learning to play the piano, like repetition, recording yourself, listening to it back, doing your exercises every day, like these kinds of basic skills. You can use them to learn a language, you can use them to learn a new subject, like just having habits of practice and rehearsal and breaking a difficult thing into parts and working on one little part at a time. Like once you get these general skills, like you can get good at whatever. Because these things are transferable to anything. But learning an instrument is a great way to get that. It's like the skill of getting skills, and that's got to be one of the most useful skills to have. James Rands asks, imagine for a moment NASA or the UN or some other big organization has developed a space-going ark. The brightest and best minds from across thousands of different fields and disciplines are being collected to send to another planet and start humanity 2.0. You get to select 3 YouTubers. Who are they? I would have that thing destroyed, and then I would destroy humanity, because I don't want to live in a new humanity that's run by YouTubers or started by YouTubers. Oh, but if I had to, let's think. LA Beast. Heather Feather. And who's my third gonna be? My brain is so broken. Milo Stewart. I don't know. This is a strange new humanity I'm creating here. Okay, Basic Butch. I love the name. C137. Hey, thank you so much for throwing yourself out there and making wonderful content in a world of YouTube trolls and misinformation. My question is, how do you find a balance for yourself as a creator? The quality of the videos has gone up, but that must mean you have to put more time and emotional energy into them. How does this impact your day-to-day? P.S. You're beautiful. Oh, thank you. Well, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because in a way, Patreon, I feel like, has driven the direction that I've gone. Namely, so I'm doing, because I charge per video on Patreon right now. That's going to change soon because I'm going to switch to my monthly. But going per video and having my pledges increase dramatically over the last year, I kind of feel like every video has to be worth the amount of money people have pledged. And so every video I make now is like this 20-minute like magnum opus. And I think that maybe if I switch to monthly pledges, I'll be able to do some videos that are just like 7 minutes long, because they won't be the only video that month. And because I think that I still want to do the big magnum opus videos, like I'm always going to want to do those from time to time, but I think it also might be, well, I don't know. I want to get feedback on this, but I can see like some subjects don't need 25 minutes, right? Like, and it would be good to be able to do like a little bit, a video that just covers a subject more succinctly, maybe. It didn't have to be the sprawling masterpiece, right? Like, just a shorter, simpler video from time to time could be good for certain subjects. But to do that, I basically need to switch to monthly. Because I don't want to be, at this point, I don't want to be charging patrons for videos that are just like 7 minutes long, right? Because you've come to expect these behemoths. Okay. Mortis Curie. I have a question for the panel members in the audience, a sort of show of hands query for them. Did they ever consider themselves more left-leaning in the past? If so, it made them change their minds. Also, best of luck out there. You'll be fine. Oh, thank you. This is a question for... So, I guess I'll make this a question for the chat. Hold on. I'll bring the chat up. So, chat, answer this. Did you consider yourself... Oh, wait, no, this is a question for... I guess this is a question for the Vancouver thing. All right, well... I will bring this to Vancouver with me. Tom Martel asks... Can you explain the story of that tapestry behind you during the violence video? The art style looks medieval. Yes, so the tapestry is this tapestry right over here. And it's called The Lady and the Unicorn. It's like a 15th century Flemish tapestry. Or it was actually a series of tapestries depicting women and unicorns. And I am embarrassed to say I actually don't know shit about it. It's a very famous piece of medieval art, like possibly one of the most famous pieces of medieval art. So look up Lady and the Unicorn tapestry, and that will give you all the information you know. And I'm going to go look it up after this stream too, because it's embarrassing that I don't know the story of this thing that I have on my wall. I just like the way it looks. Alright, Morty's curious, gonna give this another try. Didn't understand... do you believe events like Black Friday encourages de-individuation, creates a hive mind morality, allows for retail outlets to become the ultimate authority temporarily? Well, I don't know if it allows them to become the ultimate authority or if it's a hive mind thing, but I do think that... I mean, there's clearly something bad about it, right? Like, I spent a lot of the weekend just wandering around a giant shopping mall with Lindsay Ellis, and, like, fun though that is, there's something very depressing, right, about, like, mass Christmas shopping. And I mean, maybe some of it has to do with that feeling of like, oh, I'm not an individual, I'm just a drone doing this fucking capitalist thing. But like, I think it's to me, like, Black Friday is just like a heightening of the thing that's kind of always going on. Like, it's just the more extreme version of our day-to-day existence. And to me, what's depressing about like retail life is that it's just that it dominates our whole society and our whole mindset to the point where, like, how much of your life has been spent listening to advertisements or have had advertisements just pouring into your fucking brain? Like, and for no, like, there's no human good really that this is pursuing, right? It's just pursuing profit for these companies. But the thing is that which, okay, fine in and of itself, but it comes at the, it becomes to dominate the culture so much that we're just like, we just live in this ad world, this world that was like made for us for the purpose of selling shit. And that's depressing and inhumane because it's, especially since, so much of this shit is shit we don't need. Like, it's the hijacking of human desires by corporations, who are making us obsessively think we need things that we don't actually fucking need. Like, I mean, look, go walk around a shopping mall. It's all shiny and pretty and shit, and nothing on sale there is remotely necessary to human happiness or flourishing. And yet we're stampeding over each other to get it. Like, that's a sad situation, right? No, in Xizzy, that is what I want to make a video on. I want to make a video about capitalism, and I want to make the video in a shopping mall. Yeah, you're right, Xizzy. No leftists can get mad at me for this. It's easy stuff. It's easy stuff. Yeah, I should make this movie. I should make this video. Okay, Twitchy Creedles says, sorry if this has been asked before, but any specific suggestions for reading by any chance? Oh boy, someone asks this question every month. I know this question isn't as in-depth, but are there any books that gave you a particularly fresh perspective on something or inspired your style of speaking? So, I think my style of humor has been inspired by David Sedaris' short stories or short essays. That really conversational style of writing. Has, in terms of ideas, I mean, to go way, way back, Ways of Seeing by John Berger, which I talked about in my Why I Became a Feminist SJW, that book definitely had an effect. Oh, wow. There's a book by John Fusel that I haven't thought about by a long time. It's called Class. Hold on, let me look at the title of this book, because I forgot I'd read this by... Oh, Paul Fusel, sorry. The book is called Class, A Guide Through the American Status System. It's a book about... It's from the 80s. Early 80s. It's a book about class in America that's not... It's like not a Marxist look at all. It's just almost like a fucking... just merely descriptive, like, just for laughs, look at, like, the status symbols making up basically the social strata of white America in the 80s. And a lot of it's out of date now, but it's very painful and funny to see this stuff analyzed. I think that definitely had an influence on me at some point. Although I would suggest combining it with a more Marxist analysis as well, because the book isn't particularly interested in the economic underlyings of it, nor in the justice or injustice of it. It's merely describing it. Those are just two things that came to mind for no particular reason. I gotta save some books for next time someone asks me that. Let's see. What am I doing? Hey, Contra. Oh, sorry, this is Violence question. Weird question, but I'm just wondering, do you ever consider talking about making content around topics of metaphysics? Oh my gosh. Question about the nature of reality, consciousness, mind-body problem. I was into all this kind of stuff when I was much younger, and I don't ever think about it anymore, to be honest. Like, metaphysics, the mind-body problem, I just never think about it. And I think part of it is that human life can be lived without any knowledge whatsoever about these topics. And as I've gotten older, I don't know, my philosophical interests have tended to turn to much more pragmatic topics. Partially because I feel like thinking about consciousness doesn't really get us anywhere. I mean, I guess it's recreational. It's kind of a fun thing to think about recreationally. It's conceivable that I would do a video like that. I mean, you know, maybe if I just can't fucking stand the politics stuff anymore, which could well happen, maybe I'll do some videos about, like, more sort of theoretical, philosophical things, they'll probably get fewer views, but that might be okay with me later down the road. I don't know. It's not something I'm completely ruling out, but it's also not something that's particularly interesting right at this moment. Jordan Hoxie asks, "Hey Contra, love the work you do. You'll always be a hero to me." Wow. Sorry, I'm not trying to say this in a condescending way. I'm just like, I don't know how to respond to that. I'm sorry. On the subject of reading, do you have any... Oh god, I just refreshed the page by accident. Oh fuck. Everything's... What? Okay. On the subject of reading, do you have any interest in making a video on literature written by transgender queer authors? I don't know that much literature written by transgender queer authors. Someone should be recommending this stuff to me. Yeah, I don't know if apart from like books about being trans by trans authors, like I don't know any like fiction by trans authors. I would like to read some. I just don't think I have read any. That's a good question though. If anyone in the audience knows some one that wants to recommend, definitely hit me up. Yeah, Whipping Girl. That's like a more philosophical book about being trans. I'm genderqueer myself, and I feel like this is something that's isn't generally discussed, except by independent critics. Yeah, no, it's not discussed very much at all, which is interesting because we spend so much time talking about like gay authors or women authors, but there's just not like a transgender literature that exists that I know of. There probably is somewhere. Someone dig it up and send it to us. All right, Jackal59 says, not a real question, but you should look at this YouTube video. Okay, I will go look at it after this stream. Okay, let's see. So we can do a few chat questions, and then I'm doing a talk tomorrow at George Washington University. So if anyone's in DC, you should come to that. Check my Twitter. But I've got to go decide what I'm gonna say, and then try to recover from this food poisoning, because I really need to be better by the time I'm doing public speaking tomorrow. So okay, ask a few questions in the chat, and then I'm gonna go to bed. Gonna go. Oh, Al, you'll be there. That's awesome. I'm excited to see you. How do we save net neutrality? I don't know. Destroy the cable companies. Maybe that's how. Yeah, I'll watch the new season of Black Mirror. I mean, I have very mixed feelings about Black Mirror in general. Like, some episodes are really good. Some of them are just... I find them melodramatic and preachy. Thank you, Peter. I will do my best. What is my quest and favorite color? My quest is to make YouTube less bad. My favorite color, I guess, is that shade of pink that comes right between the red and the blue. I think you guys know what my favorite color is. Well, I guess you could call it purple, but like, look at that color down there. Like, I wouldn't call that purple. It's more of a pink. It's magenta, yeah. Because over here, you got like, see the wall over here is like more of a lavender kind of color, like a light purple. And over here where it's more reddish. I guess that's a good question. Which do I like better? Do I like the lavender or the magenta? I don't know. They're so good in combination, I don't want to isolate them. What do I want for Christmas? Oh, here's what I want for Christmas. I want like hippie bath products. Like this is something I never was never into when I was younger, but like just like hippie bullshit lotions and like oils and shit. I like that stuff now. I'm trying to transition into it. Just skip my 30s and transition straight into being a middle-aged woman. The two corners that will, yeah, the new, there's, yeah, there's pink color and lavender color. All right, I think actually people are not being super inquisitive, so I'm just gonna go ahead and end the stream here, and I am gonna go try to recover from the terrible food poisoning that has stricken me, and we will have more streams soon. Thank you guys for standing by me and for helping me move past this shitty fucking month. Um, Good night for now, and goodbye.